Good evening. My name is Writer Histories. Welcome to my channel.
Today I'm going to report two scary cases of terror and fear that happened in real life. It was a cold autumn night in Chicago, USA, when the fire department received an urgent call. A man had suffered a terrible accident in an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city. Upon arrival, the firefighters were greeted with a gruesome scene. The sound of old machines humming echoed through the dim environment. Among the shadows, they found a man screaming in pain, his arm trapped in an old iron grinder. His face was twisted in agony, and blood dripped from the wound. Equipped with their flashlights and rescue tools, the firefighters faced the darkness of the abandoned factory. Every step echoed through the empty corridors, creating an atmosphere of suspense and tension. The environment seemed to pulsate with a dark energy, as if the building itself were alive and watching. As they attempted to free the man from the grinder, strange noises began to echo through the walls. They were indistinct whispers, voices that seemed to echo from somewhere beyond reality. The firefighters exchanged nervous glances but remained determined to save the man. As they worked to cut the grinder's parts and free the man's arm, a sense of unease grew in the air. Shadows danced around them, moving in a sinister and threatening manner. The air was thick with the metallic smell of the injured man's blood, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Suddenly, a hoarse, guttural voice cut through the silence, echoing through the corridors. "He won't make it out of here alive," whispered the voice, sending shivers down the firefighters' spines. They looked around but saw no one. The environment was deserted except for them and the injured man. Determined to ignore the invisible threat, the firefighters redoubled their efforts to free the man from the grinder. But as they neared success, something strange began to happen. The old machines came to life, purring and hissing as if they possessed a malevolent intelligence. Then, suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the factory into total darkness. The firefighters felt surrounded by a sinister presence, as if they were being watched by invisible eyes. Panic began to creep into their minds as they struggled to keep their composure. With one last effort, the firefighters managed to free the man from the grinder. But when they finally brought him out of the abandoned factory, he was pale and lifeless. His glazed eyes stared into the void, and his body seemed to have been drained of all vitality. As the firefighters looked horrified at the dead man, a sense of terror enveloped them. They knew that something terrible dwelled in that abandoned place, something beyond human comprehension. With a shiver down their spines, they retreated from the factory, leaving behind the dark secrets that resided there. And so, the story of the macabre rescue in the abandoned factory of Chicago in 2001 became an urban legend, haunting the city for years to come. It was a dark night, the sky shrouded in dark clouds, as if sensing the imminent evil. In the heart of the city, an old building stood, its dark and silent windows witnesses to what was to come. On the 12th floor, Mrs. Elena was in her modest home, caring for her young son, Miguel. The two were enveloped in maternal affection, while outside the wind howled with a sinister premonition. Suddenly, the smell of smoke filled the air, followed by the sound of distant sirens. The fire roared hungrily, devouring everything in its path, enveloping the building in an infernal aura. Desperation quickly set in among the residents as chaos spread through the hallways. Elena, holding Miguel in her arms, knew she needed to act quickly to save her son. With her heart in tatters, she ran towards the only possible escape route, the fire escape. But as they approached the stairs, a wall of flames blocked their path. She looked back, seeing the fire advancing mercilessly towards them. With no time to lose, Elena made the most agonizing decision of her life. With tears in her eyes, she held Miguel tightly and, with one last kiss on his forehead, she threw him into the void towards the safety net that the firefighters had extended below. Elena's heart stopped for a moment as she watched her son soar through the air, a surreal sight amidst the hell that surrounded them. She silently begged the firefighters to reach him in time. Time seemed to freeze as Miguel fell towards uncertain salvation. And then, in a moment of unbearable agony, he disappeared from sight, plunging into the darkness below. Elena's desperate cry echoed through the empty hallway when she finally heard the sound of distant voices, followed by the muffled thud of Miguel's body being caught by the net. She clung to the hope that her son was safe. As the firefighters rushed to rescue Miguel, Elena faced the fire alone. Her maternal love propelled her through the flames, her mind a mix of anguish and determination. She would not rest until she was by her son's side again. In the end, the firefighters managed to save Miguel, but not without cost. Elena was found unconscious among the rubble, her body exhausted and burned, but her spirit still vibrant with hope for a future alongside her beloved son. And so, amidst the ashes and tragedy, the story of Elena and Miguel became a dark reminder of a mother's unbreakable love, even in the face of the cruelest adversities. The nights in the city had become a maze of fear for Marcos, where every corner concealed a silent threat, every shadow harbored the imminent danger of his pursuers. He crept through the streets, ever vigilant, his heart hammering in his chest like an incessant war drum. The pain burned in every fiber of his being, both physical and emotional. The marks of his torture were like scars etched into his skin, constantly reminding him of the cruelty of the men who had broken him. Yet it was the invisible scars, those that lodged in his soul, that afflicted him most deeply. Marcos desperately tried to keep his family safe, hiding in the shadows and dodging the watchful eyes of Santiago's thugs. But despite his Herculean efforts, he knew he was losing the battle. Santiago's shadow loomed over them, a dark cloud that obscured any hope of redemption. As the days dragged on, Marcos found himself increasingly isolated. His friends abandoned him out of fear of reprisals, and even members of his own family began to question his ability to protect them. He was a marked man, a shadow of his former existence, consumed by the darkness that enveloped him. In his despair, Marcos attempted to negotiate with Santiago, pleading for mercy, but the lone shark showed no mercy. Instead, he increased the pressure, sending his henchmen to terrorize Marcos even more. Each visit was a grim reminder of his inevitable fate, a death sentence hanging over his head like a sword of Damocles. And then, on a cold, dark night, when the moon barely illuminated the deserted streets, the thugs finally found him. They did not come with words, but with savage violence, dragging Marcos into a dark alley where the light of civilization could not reach. The hours that followed were a nightmare of pain and agony, where each blow was an echo of his own hopelessness. But even amidst the darkness, a flame of determination burned within him. He refused to fully surrender to despair, finding strength in the depths of his torn soul. In the end, when the thugs finally retreated, leaving him alone in the empty alley, Marcos knew his time had finally come. He felt the cold embrace of death slowly approaching, enveloping him in its icy arms. And so, in his final breath, Marcos closed his eyes and surrendered to the darkness, his life extinguishing like a candle burned to the end. His story ended in silence, a somber echo of a life consumed by fear and the cruelty of men. And in the empty streets of the city, only the wind whispered his name, a fleeting reminder of a man who dared to defy the shadows.